Question 1. The assessment process reveals that users in the developers group are frequently deploying virtual machines using a standard blueprint, but there are concerns about them inadvertently configuring these machines with excessive network access and insufficient security hardening, leading to potential compliance violations. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation while adhering to professional best practices for secure cloud automation? Option A. Implement a manual review process after each deployment to verify network access and security hardening settings before the virtual machines are considered production ready. Option B. Remove all security and network configuration constraints from the blueprint to allow for faster deployment cycles, relying on post-deployment patching to address any security gaps. Option C. Grant all users in the developers group elevated privileges when deploying from this blueprint to allow them full control and flexibility in configuring the machines as needed. Option D. Associate specific roles and permissions with the blueprint that restrict the network configurations and enforce security hardening parameters, ensuring only authorized and correctly configured deployments. Correct answer is D. Associate specific roles and permissions with the blueprint that restrict the network configurations and enforce security hardening parameters, ensuring only authorized and correctly configured deployments. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments where resource provisioning needs to align with organizational policies and security best practices. The core difficulty lies in balancing the speed and agility offered by vRealize automation with the imperative to maintain compliance and prevent unauthorized access or misconfiguration. The professional challenge is to implement a solution that is both efficient and secure, adhering to the principles of least privilege and robust governance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified security vulnerability by enforcing granular access controls at the blueprint level. By associating specific roles and permissions with the blueprint, administrators ensure that only authorized personnel can deploy resources with specific configurations. This aligns with the principle of least privilege, a fundamental security tenet, and promotes a more secure and auditable deployment process. It also ensures that the deployment process itself is governed by defined policies, reducing the risk of shadow IT or unauthorized configuration. An incorrect approach that involves granting broad administrative privileges to all users attempting to deploy from the blueprint is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This violates the principle of least privilege, opening the door to unauthorized access, accidental misconfigurations, and potential security breaches. It creates an environment where accountability is diluted, making it difficult to trace who performed specific actions. From a compliance perspective, this approach would likely fail audits and expose the organization to significant risks. Another incorrect approach, which relies solely on post-deployment manual security checks, is also professionally unacceptable. While manual checks can be a supplementary measure, relying on them as the primary security control is inefficient and prone to human error. It fails to proactively prevent insecure configurations from being deployed in the first place, which is a core objective of automation platforms. This reactive approach increases the likelihood of vulnerabilities persisting in the environment and can lead to costly remediation efforts. A third incorrect approach, which involves disabling all security checks within the blueprint to expedite deployment, represents a severe breach of professional responsibility and regulatory compliance. This prioritizes speed over security and governance, directly contravening established security policies and potentially violating data protection regulations. It creates an environment ripe for exploitation and demonstrates a disregard for the organization's security posture and the integrity of its IT infrastructure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment of the proposed automation workflows. This includes identifying potential security vulnerabilities, compliance gaps, and operational risks. The next step is to design automation solutions that incorporate security and governance controls from the outset, rather than as an afterthought. This involves leveraging the granular access control and policy enforcement capabilities of vRealize automation. Finally, continuous monitoring and auditing of deployed resources and automation processes are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and security. Question 2. During the evaluation of a new cloud automation strategy for a financial services organization, which approach best balances the need for rapid provisioning of virtual machines with stringent regulatory compliance and security mandates. Option A. Implementing a comprehensive blueprinting strategy within VMware vRealize automation that incorporates security policies, compliance checks, and cost controls directly into the service catalog offerings. Option B. Prioritizing the fastest possible deployment of virtual machines by allowing direct provisioning with minimal pre-deployment checks, relying on post-deployment audits for compliance. Option C. Enabling unrestricted self-service provisioning for all users, with a separate manual process for security and compliance reviews after resources are deployed. Option D. Developing custom scripts for each provisioning request to ensure maximum flexibility, bypassing standard vRealize automation catalog deployments. The correct answer is A. Implementing a comprehensive blueprinting strategy within VMware vRealize automation that incorporates security policies, compliance checks, and cost controls directly into the service catalog offerings. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments where multiple stakeholders have differing requirements and perspectives on resource provisioning and governance. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid service delivery with the imperative to maintain security, compliance, and cost control. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen automation strategy aligns with organizational policies and regulatory mandates, without stifling innovation or operational efficiency. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured and policy-driven method for defining and enforcing resource deployment standards. By leveraging VMware vRealize automation's capabilities for blueprinting, policy enforcement, and integration with governance tools, an organization can establish a robust framework for automated provisioning. This approach ensures that all deployed resources adhere to predefined security baselines, compliance requirements, e.g., data residency, access controls, and cost management strategies. This aligns with the principles of responsible IT governance and risk management, which are implicitly expected in professional IT operations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed of deployment without considering governance would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for established security protocols and compliance obligations. For instance, deploying resources without automated security checks or cost controls could lead to vulnerabilities, data breaches, or significant budget overruns, all of which carry substantial regulatory and financial repercussions. Another incorrect approach that relies on manual intervention for every deployment, even for routine requests, undermines the core purpose of automation. This leads to inefficiencies, increased error rates and delays, failing to deliver on the promise of agile IT service delivery, and potentially violating service-level agreements. A third incorrect approach that bypasses established change management processes for automated deployments introduces significant risk. This can lead to unintended consequences, system instability, and a lack of auditability, all of which are critical failures in a regulated environment. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of organizational policies, regulatory requirements, and business objectives. This framework should then involve evaluating the capabilities of automation tools like vRealize automation against these requirements. The process should include defining clear governance policies, designing blueprints that embed these policies, and implementing robust testing and validation procedures before deploying any automated workflows. Continuous monitoring and auditing of automated deployments are also crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and identify areas for improvement. Question 3. The efficiency study reveals that the automated provisioning of virtual machines in VMware vRealize Automation 8.3 is experiencing significant delays, impacting development team productivity. The investigation points to a potential issue within the custom resource actions defined in the blueprints. Which of the following diagnostic steps is the most appropriate first action to identify the root cause of this provisioning bottleneck? Option A. Increase the allocated compute resources for the vRealize automation appliance to improve processing speed. Option B. Disable all custom resource actions in the affected blueprints to isolate the problem to the custom code. Option C. Review the vRealize automation logs for specific errors or prolonged execution times associated with the custom resource actions during a provisioning attempt. Option D. Immediately update all custom resource scripts to their latest versions without analyzing their current performance. The correct answer is A. Increase the allocated compute resources for the vRealize automation appliance to improve processing speed. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a significant bottleneck in the automated provisioning of virtual machines within the VMware vRealize automation VRA 8.3 environment. This bottleneck directly impacts the speed at which development teams can acquire necessary resources, hindering agile development cycles and potentially leading to project delays. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of this inefficiency and implementing a solution that not only resolves the immediate problem, but also adheres to best practices for automation, security, and resource management within the vRA framework. A hasty or ill-considered solution could introduce new vulnerabilities, increase operational costs, or violate established IT governance policies. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation of the vRA blueprint design, specifically focusing on the execution order of custom resources and the efficiency of any integrated scripting. Analyzing the vRA logs for errors or prolonged execution times during the provisioning workflow is paramount. Furthermore, evaluating the underlying infrastructure dependencies and their responsiveness during the provisioning process is crucial. This methodical approach ensures that the solution addresses the actual cause of the inefficiency, rather than a symptom, and aligns with the principles of robust and secure automation as expected within a professional VMware environment. Adherence to vRA best practices, such as modular blueprint design and efficient scripting, is implicitly mandated by the professional standards expected for this certification. An incorrect approach would be to simply increase the allocated resources to the vRA infrastructure components without understanding the underlying workflow. This is akin to treating a fever without diagnosing the infection. It might offer temporary improvement but fails to address the root cause and could lead to unnecessary resource expenditure. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass or disable certain validation checks within the provisioning workflow to speed things up. This is a direct violation of security best practices and could expose the environment to misconfigurations or unauthorized resource deployments, leading to significant compliance and operational risks. Finally, modifying the vRA configuration without proper change control and testing procedures is a recipe for disaster, potentially destabilizing the entire automation platform and impacting multiple services. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clear problem definition, followed by hypothesis generation, data collection and analysis, logs, performance metrics, solution design and evaluation, considering impact, feasibility, and adherence to standards, implementation with rigorous testing, and finally, ongoing monitoring and refinement. This iterative process ensures that solutions are effective, efficient, and maintainable. Question 4. Operational review demonstrates that a critical, time-sensitive project requiring immediate provisioning of additional compute resources within the VMware vRealize automation environment is facing delays due to the standard resource request process. The project manager has approached you, a vRA administrator, requesting expedited provisioning, implying that the project's success is contingent on immediate access to these resources. You have the technical capability to bypass the standard approval workflow and directly allocate the necessary resources. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Escalate the project's urgency and resource requirement through the established change management and resource allocation escalation channels, providing all necessary justification for expedited review. Option B. Discreetly adjust resource quotas for other less critical projects to free up capacity for the urgent project, without informing anyone of the change. Option C. Politely inform the project manager that the standard resource request process must be followed and suggest they reprioritize their request within the existing queue. Option D. Immediately provision the requested resources directly to the critical project, documenting the action as an emergency override due to project criticality. The correct answer is D. Immediately provision the requested resources directly to the critical project, documenting the action as an emergency override due to project criticality. Explanation. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma common in IT operations, specifically concerning resource allocation and potential conflicts of interest within a cloud automation platform like VMware vRealize Automation vRealize. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate needs of a critical project with established organizational policies and the principle of fair access to shared resources. The professional must navigate the temptation to bypass standard procedures for expediency, which could lead to long-term negative consequences. The correct approach prioritizes transparency, adherence to policy, and equitable resource distribution. By following the established change management and resource request processes, the professional upholds the integrity of the VRA environment and ensures that all users and projects are treated fairly. This aligns with best practices for IT governance, which emphasize accountability, auditability, and risk management. Specifically, it prevents unauthorized resource allocation, which could lead to cost overruns, security vulnerabilities, or performance degradation for other users. This approach demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct by avoiding favoritism and maintaining a neutral stance in resource allocation. An incorrect approach that involves directly provisioning the resources without proper approval bypasses critical control mechanisms. This represents a failure in adhering to organizational policies and procedures, which are designed to manage risk and ensure accountability. Such an action could be seen as a breach of trust and could lead to an audit finding, potential disciplinary action, and a weakening of the overall security posture of the vRA deployment. It also sets a dangerous precedent, encouraging others to circumvent established processes. Another incorrect approach, which involves subtly manipulating resource quotas or configurations to appear as if the resources were allocated through the standard process, is even more problematic. This constitutes a deliberate attempt to deceive and circumvent controls. It is not only a violation of policy, but also an act of professional dishonesty. This approach undermines the audit trail and makes it difficult to track resource usage accurately, potentially leading to significant financial and security risks. It erodes the foundation of trust necessary for effective IT operations. A third incorrect approach, which involves delaying the request or suggesting the project can wait, while seemingly compliant, fails to address the urgency of the situation and could negatively impact the business. While adhering to policy is important, a professional also has a responsibility to facilitate business objectives where possible and ethical. The correct approach would involve escalating the urgency through the proper channels, rather than simply dismissing the request or passively waiting. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Understanding the organizational policies and procedures related to resource allocation and change management. 2. Assessing the urgency and impact of the request. 3. Communicating transparently with stakeholders, including the project team and relevant management. 4. Utilizing established escalation paths when necessary. 5. Documenting all actions and communications. This structured approach ensures that decisions are made ethically, compliantly, and in the best interest of the organization. Question 5. Regulatory review indicates that a new self-service catalog item for provisioning development environments has been designed with a focus on rapid deployment to meet urgent business needs. However, the design team has proposed bypassing the standard security and compliance review process for this initial deployment, citing the temporary nature of the environments and the limited access controls. What is the most professionally responsible approach to ensure adherence to regulatory frameworks and best practices? Option A. Deploy the service blueprint with a disclaimer stating that security and compliance have not been fully assessed, and rely on the development team to implement necessary security measures post-deployment. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive security and compliance review of the service blueprint, including data handling and access control mechanisms, before deployment, and if necessary, propose phased deployment or temporary mitigating controls that are documented and approved. Option C. Deploy the service blueprint immediately to meet business needs, and schedule a security and compliance review for the operational phase, assuming the underlying infrastructure security will suffice. Option D. Implement a basic security check for the service blueprint, focusing only on network connectivity and default credential settings, and proceed with deployment, documenting the limited scope of the review. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive security and compliance review of the service blueprint, including data handling and access control mechanisms, before deployment, and if necessary, propose phased deployment or temporary mitigating controls that are documented and approved. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new services and the need for robust security and compliance. The pressure to deliver new capabilities quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass established security protocols and regulatory requirements. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to balance agility with adherence to the established governance framework, ensuring that all deployments meet the defined security and compliance standards without undue delay. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured review process that integrates security and compliance checks early in the service blueprint design phase. This proactive integration ensures that potential risks are identified and mitigated before deployment. It aligns with best practices for secure development and deployment, which are often mandated by regulatory frameworks that require demonstrable due diligence in security and compliance. By embedding these checks, the organization maintains an auditable trail of compliance and minimizes the risk of post-deployment remediation, which is costly and disruptive. This approach fosters a culture of security and compliance by design. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves deploying the service blueprint without a formal security review, relying solely on the assumption that the underlying infrastructure is secure. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses a critical control point designed to identify and mitigate application-specific vulnerabilities or misconfigurations. It represents a failure to adhere to established security governance, potentially violating regulatory requirements that mandate risk assessments for new services. Another incorrect approach is to defer all security and compliance checks to the post-deployment operational phase. This is a significant ethical and professional failure. It introduces unacceptable risk by allowing potentially insecure or non-compliant services to operate in the production environment. Regulatory frameworks typically require that security and compliance be addressed proactively, not reactively. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and can lead to severe consequences, including data breaches and regulatory penalties. A further incorrect approach is to implement a superficial security review that only checks for basic configuration settings without a deep dive into the service's specific security posture or data handling practices. This is professionally deficient as it fails to adequately address the unique risks associated with the new service. It creates a false sense of security and compliance, potentially leading to undetected vulnerabilities that could be exploited. This approach falls short of the professional obligation to conduct thorough and effective risk assessments as often stipulated by regulatory bodies. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to service deployment. This involves understanding the potential impact of a service on security and compliance and tailoring the review process accordingly. The decision-making framework should prioritize early and continuous integration of security and compliance into the service lifecycle. This includes establishing clear policies and procedures for service blueprint review, ensuring that all stakeholders are aware of their responsibilities, and maintaining comprehensive documentation of all review and remediation activities. When faced with pressure to expedite deployment, professionals must advocate for adherence to established governance, clearly articulating the risks associated with shortcuts and proposing alternative solutions that maintain compliance without compromising security. Question 6. Process analysis reveals that a VMware vRealize Automation 8.3 deployment is experiencing a high volume of resource requests being fulfilled rapidly, but there are concerns regarding potential security misconfigurations and adherence to internal governance policies. Which of the following evaluation approaches best aligns with professional best practices for assessing the effectiveness and compliance of this automation framework? Option A. Assess the vRealize Automation 8.3 deployment by prioritizing the reduction of provisioning time for all resource types, assuming that speed inherently indicates efficiency and effectiveness. Option B. Conduct a manual review of every single resource deployed through vRealize Automation 8.3 to identify any deviations from standard configurations, irrespective of the automation workflows themselves. Option C. Examine the vRealize Automation 8.3 deployment by implementing a series of reactive security patches whenever vulnerabilities are identified post-deployment, without altering the existing automation workflows. Option D. Evaluate the vRealize Automation 8.3 deployment by focusing on the integration of automated security scanning and compliance checks within blueprint development and deployment pipelines, alongside a review of role-based access control (RBAC) configurations and audit logging capabilities. Correct answer is D. Evaluate the vRealize Automation 8.3 deployment by focusing on the integration of automated security scanning and compliance checks within blueprint development and deployment pipelines, alongside a review of role-based access control (RBAC) configurations and audit logging capabilities. Explanation: Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments where the rapid deployment of resources can outpace the establishment of robust governance and security controls. The professional is tasked with evaluating the effectiveness of existing automation workflows against established best practices and regulatory compliance requirements, specifically within the context of VMware vRealize Automation 8.3. The challenge lies in balancing the agility offered by automation with the imperative to maintain security, compliance, and operational stability. Failure to do so can lead to significant security vulnerabilities, audit failures, and increased operational risk. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the vRealize Automation 8.3 deployment against industry-standard best practices for cloud automation and governance, as well as any applicable internal policies or external regulations. This includes assessing the implementation of role-based access control (RBAC) to ensure least privilege, the effectiveness of blueprint validation and testing processes to prevent misconfigurations, and the integration of security scanning and compliance checks within the deployment pipeline. Furthermore, it entails verifying that audit logging is comprehensive and that resource lifecycle management is automated and adheres to defined policies. This approach ensures that the automation framework is not only functional, but also secure, compliant, and auditable, aligning with the principles of responsible cloud management. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that focuses solely on the speed of resource provisioning without considering security or compliance overlooks critical governance requirements. This can lead to unauthorized access, data breaches, and non-compliance with regulatory mandates, such as those related to data privacy or system integrity. Another incorrect approach might be to prioritize manual oversight of all deployments, which negates the benefits of automation and introduces human error, inefficiency, and delays, ultimately undermining the purpose of using vRealize automation. Lastly, an approach that relies on ad hoc security measures rather than integrating them into the automation workflows is reactive and prone to gaps, failing to provide consistent protection and making audits difficult. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing the evaluation of automation workflows that have the highest potential impact on security, compliance, and business operations. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the organization and mapping vRealize Automation's capabilities and configurations against these requirements. A continuous improvement mindset is crucial, where regular assessments and updates to automation policies and procedures are performed to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory changes. Collaboration with security, compliance, and operations teams is essential to ensure a holistic and effective governance strategy. Question 7. Process analysis reveals that the current vRealize Automation 8.3 deployment process prioritizes rapid provisioning of virtual machines and services to meet business demands, with limited formal review of security configurations or access controls within the blueprints themselves. What is the most effective approach to evaluate and improve this process to ensure best practices and compliance? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive audit of the entire vRealize deployment lifecycle, focusing on blueprint security validation, access control mechanisms, approval workflows, and audit logging to identify and remediate potential risks and compliance gaps. Option B. Focus the evaluation solely on the initial request and approval stages of the deployment, as this is where the primary control point exists. Option C. Implement automated scripts to measure the time taken for each deployment and identify bottlenecks to further optimize provisioning speed. Option D. Review only the technical specifications of deployed resources to ensure they meet functional requirements, disregarding the provisioning process itself. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive audit of the entire vRealize deployment lifecycle, focusing on blueprint security validation, access control mechanisms, approval workflows, and audit logging to identify and remediate potential risks and compliance gaps. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments or the rapid pace of development and deployment can outstrip robust governance and security practices. The professional is tasked with evaluating the effectiveness of existing vRealize automation, vRA deployment processes against established best practices and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in identifying deviations that could lead to security vulnerabilities, operational inefficiencies, and non-compliance with internal policies or external regulations. Even if not explicitly stated in the prompt, the underlying principle of secure and compliant operations is paramount in any professional IT environment. The need for a systematic and thorough evaluation is critical to prevent potential data breaches, unauthorized access, or service disruptions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the entire vRA deployment lifecycle, from initial request to resource decommissioning. This includes scrutinizing access controls, approval workflows, blueprint security configurations, and audit logging mechanisms. Adherence to the principle of least privilege, robust change management, and comprehensive auditing are foundational to secure and compliant operations. By ensuring that only authorized personnel can approve deployments, that blueprints are validated for security, and that all actions are logged for accountability, the organization upholds its responsibility to protect sensitive data and maintain operational integrity. This aligns with general IT governance principles that emphasize security by design and continuous monitoring. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on the speed of deployment without a corresponding emphasis on security and compliance is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach prioritizes expediency over risk mitigation, potentially exposing the organization to vulnerabilities. It neglects the fundamental duty to protect company assets and customer data. Concentrating only on the technical functionality of deployed resources, without considering the underlying security configurations or access controls, creates blind spots. This oversight can lead to resources being deployed with insecure defaults or accessible by unauthorized individuals, violating principles of data protection and access management. Limiting the evaluation to only the initial provisioning phase ignores the entire lifecycle of a deployed resource. This includes the critical aspects of ongoing management, patching, and eventual decommissioning. Failure to address these phases can result in orphaned resources, unpatched vulnerabilities, and continued access to sensitive data long after a resource is no longer needed, representing a failure in operational security and resource governance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to evaluating automation processes. This involves identifying critical assets and sensitive data, understanding potential threats and vulnerabilities, and prioritizing controls that mitigate the highest risks. A systematic review of the entire automation lifecycle, incorporating security and compliance checks at each stage, is essential. Regular audits and adherence to established change management procedures are crucial for maintaining a secure and compliant environment. Professionals must advocate for and implement processes that balance efficiency with robust security and governance. Question 8. Implementation of a new VMware vRealize Automation 8.3 solution to automate the provisioning of virtual machines for a financial services organization requires careful consideration of its potential impact on existing security controls and regulatory compliance. Which of the following approaches best ensures that the automation process adheres to industry best practices and relevant financial regulations? Option A. Prioritize rapid deployment of the vRA solution to meet business demands, deferring any detailed security and compliance reviews until after the system is operational. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates the proposed vRA workflows against current security policies, data protection regulations, and internal audit requirements, identifying and mitigating potential risks before deployment. Option C. Proceed with the implementation using the default security configurations provided by vRA, assuming they are sufficient for a financial services environment. Option D. Implement the vRA solution with custom security scripts developed ad hoc by the engineering team, without formal review or integration into the overall security architecture. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates the proposed vRA workflows against current security policies, data protection regulations, and internal audit requirements, identifying and mitigating potential risks before deployment. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The professional is tasked with implementing a new vRealize automation (vRA) solution that will automate the provisioning of critical infrastructure. The core challenge lies in ensuring that the automation itself does not introduce vulnerabilities or bypass existing security controls, which could have significant regulatory and operational repercussions. The pressure to deliver quickly can tempt shortcuts, but a thorough impact assessment is paramount to prevent future breaches, data loss, or non-compliance with industry standards and internal policies. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates the proposed vRA implementation against existing security policies, compliance frameworks, and operational procedures. This includes identifying potential risks associated with automated provisioning, such as unauthorized access, data exposure, or configuration drift. By proactively identifying and mitigating these risks during the design and implementation phases, the organization can ensure that the vRA solution enhances, rather than compromises, its security posture and regulatory adherence. This aligns with best practices in IT governance and risk management, emphasizing a proactive, risk-based approach to technology adoption. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with implementation without a formal impact assessment. This bypasses critical risk identification and mitigation steps, directly violating principles of due diligence and responsible IT management. Such an oversight could lead to regulatory noncompliance if the automated processes inadvertently violate data privacy laws, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, depending on jurisdiction, or industry-specific regulations, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare, PCI DSS for payment card data. Ethically, it represents a failure to protect organizational assets and sensitive data, potentially leading to reputational damage and financial penalties. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the default security settings of vRA without considering the specific organizational context and threat landscape. This is insufficient because default configurations are often generic and may not meet the stringent requirements of a particular organization's compliance obligations or risk appetite. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment and compliance validation before and during any significant IT implementation. This involves 1. Understanding the business and technical objectives of the implementation. 2. Identifying all relevant regulatory and policy requirements. 3. Conducting a thorough impact assessment to map potential risks and compliance gaps. 4. Developing and implementing mitigation strategies. 5. Establishing ongoing monitoring and auditing processes. This structured approach ensures that technology deployments are secure, compliant, and aligned with organizational goals. Question 9. Cost-benefit analysis shows that integrating a new third-party monitoring service into the vRealize automation environment will significantly improve operational visibility and reduce incident response times. However, the standard integration process requires a security review and validation of the service's API endpoints and data handling practices, which could delay deployment by several days. Given the urgency, what is the most professionally responsible approach to integrating this service? Option A. Implement the integration immediately using a custom script that bypasses the standard security review, assuming the third-party service is trustworthy. Option B. Delay the integration until a more comprehensive but time-consuming architectural review can be completed, even if it means missing the immediate business opportunity. Option C. Proceed with the integration using the standard security review and validation process, communicating the expected timeline to stakeholders and highlighting the long-term security benefits. Option D. Integrate the service using a generic connector that is already approved, even if it does not fully leverage the monitoring service's advanced features, to meet the immediate deployment deadline. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the integration using the standard security review and validation process, communicating the expected timeline to stakeholders and highlighting the long-term security benefits. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the desire for rapid deployment with the need for robust security and compliance. The professional is tasked with implementing a solution that meets business demands while adhering to established security policies and potentially regulatory requirements. though specific regulations are not detailed in the prompt. The implication is that a professional environment necessitates adherence to some form of governance. The challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method for integrating a new service into the vRealize automation environment, ensuring that security controls are not bypassed or compromised in the pursuit of speed. The correct approach prioritizes a structured and secure integration process by leveraging existing, approved integration patterns and ensuring that all security configurations are validated before deployment. The professional upholds best practices for secure cloud operations. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, ensuring that the new service operates within defined security boundaries. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of introducing vulnerabilities and maintains the integrity of the overall automation platform, which is crucial for long-term operational stability and compliance. An incorrect approach that bypasses established security review processes introduces significant risk. This failure to adhere to security protocols can lead to the deployment of services with unaddressed vulnerabilities, potentially exposing sensitive data or disrupting operations. Such an action would be a direct violation of security best practices and could contravene internal governance policies or external regulatory mandates if applicable, leading to audit failures, security incidents, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical feasibility without considering the security implications, is equally problematic. While the integration might be technically possible, it may not be secure or compliant. This demonstrates a lack of holistic understanding of the implementation requirements, prioritizing a single aspect over the broader operational and security context. This can lead to technical debt and future remediation efforts. Finally, an approach that delays the integration indefinitely due to perceived complexity, without exploring viable solutions or seeking necessary approvals, represents a failure in proactive problem-solving and business enablement. A caution is necessary. An inability to adapt and integrate new capabilities can hinder business agility and innovation. The professional decision-making process should involve a thorough understanding of the business requirements, a comprehensive assessment of security implications, and a clear understanding of the available integration mechanisms within vRealize automation. Prioritizing security and compliance from the outset, engaging with security teams early, and following established change management procedures are critical steps in ensuring successful and secure implementation. Question 10. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly leveraging VMware vRealize automation for rapid service delivery. In this context, what is the most effective approach to ensure that the deployment of new services through vRealize aligns with the organization's security policies and compliance requirements without unduly hindering agility? Option A. Focus solely on post-deployment security vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, assuming that any critical risks will be identified and addressed in subsequent operational phases. Option B. Implement a standardized automated risk assessment workflow that is an integral part of the vRealize service catalog and blueprint approval process, requiring sign-off before a service is made available for consumption. Option C. Allow individual teams to perform their own risk assessments using ad hoc methods, with the understanding that they are responsible for any security or compliance issues that arise post-deployment. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive, manual risk assessment for every new service request after it has been provisioned by vRealize. Correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive manual risk assessment for every new service request after it has been provisioned by vRealize. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation where the rapid deployment capabilities of VMware vRealize automation, vRealize, can outpace the established risk assessment processes. The challenge lies in balancing the agility offered by vRealize with the imperative to maintain a robust security posture and compliance with organizational policies and potentially industry-specific regulations. Though for this exam, we focus on the internal governance and best practices framework implied by the exam scope. The pressure to deliver services quickly can lead to shortcuts in risk evaluation, potentially exposing the organization to vulnerabilities or non-compliance. Careful judgment is required to integrate risk assessment seamlessly into the vRealize lifecycle without becoming a bottleneck. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves embedding risk assessment directly into the vRealize service catalog and blueprint design process. This means that before a service or blueprint is made available for self-service consumption, it undergoes a defined risk evaluation. This evaluation would consider factors such as the sensitivity of data processed, the criticality of the application, the required security control, and potential compliance implications. By making risk assessment a prerequisite for deployment, it ensures that security and compliance are considered from the outset, aligning with the principle of security by design. This proactive stance is best professional practice as it minimizes the likelihood of deploying insecure or non-compliant services, thereby reducing the organization's attack surface and potential for regulatory breaches. This aligns with general IT governance frameworks that emphasize risk management throughout the IT service lifecycle. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on post-deployment security audits. This is a reactive measure that fails to prevent risks from materializing. If a service is deployed with inherent security flaws or compliance gaps, the damage may already be done by the time it's discovered. This approach represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting organizational assets and adhering to established security policies. It also increases the cost and complexity of remediation. Another incorrect approach is to delegate risk assessment entirely to the end users or application owners without providing them with clear guidelines or a standardized process. This leads to inconsistent and often inadequate risk evaluations. Users may not have the expertise to identify all potential risks or may prioritize speed of deployment over thoroughness. This failure in governance can lead to the unauthorized deployment of services that violate security policies or compliance mandates, creating an unacceptable level of risk. A third incorrect approach is to implement a manual ad hoc risk assessment process that is not integrated with the vRealize workflow. This often results in delays, missed assessments, and a lack of auditability. When risk assessment is a separate manual step, it is easily bypassed under pressure, undermining the entire risk management framework. This lack of integration and process discipline is a failure in operational efficiency and risk governance, making it difficult to demonstrate compliance and track risk mitigation efforts. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to cloud automation by integrating risk assessment into the vRealize design and deployment lifecycle. This involves establishing clear policies and procedures for risk evaluation, defining risk appetite, and ensuring that all services and blueprints are assessed against these criteria before being offered to users. The decision-making process should prioritize proactive risk identification and mitigation over reactive remediation. This involves 1. Understanding the organization's risk tolerance and compliance obligations. 2. Defining standardized risk assessment criteria applicable to vRealize deployments. 3. Automating or semi-automating the risk assessment process where possible, integrating it into the vRealize catalog and blueprint approval workflows. 4. Providing training and clear guidance to teams responsible for designing and deploying services in vRealize. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment process based on evolving threats and organizational needs. Question 11. Investigation of a security alert indicating that several newly provisioned virtual machines deployed via vRealize automation are running an outdated and vulnerable version of a critical software component. The alert specifies that this vulnerability was introduced during the initial deployment process, not through subsequent user actions. The IT security team requires a swift resolution and a clear explanation of how this occurred and how it will be prevented in the future. Option A. Apply the latest security patches to the operating system of the affected virtual machines, assuming this will resolve the software component vulnerability. Option B. Examine vRealize automation audit logs to identify the specific blueprint and associated workflow or custom script responsible for the vulnerable software component's deployment. Then update the blueprint or script to deploy the secure version. Option C. Disable the specific blueprint that was used for provisioning until a full security review can be completed, without investigating the root cause of the vulnerability. Option D. Manually update the vulnerable software component on all affected virtual machines, and then re-image them to ensure consistency. The correct answer is B. Examine vRealize automation audit logs to identify the specific blueprint and associated workflow or custom script responsible for the vulnerable software components deployment. Then update the blueprint or script to deploy the secure version. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments where resource provisioning is automated but security and compliance oversight lags behind. The professional is tasked with identifying the root cause of a security vulnerability introduced through an automated workflow. The challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid remediation with the requirement to maintain auditability and prevent future occurrences, all while adhering to established operational procedures and security policies. The pressure to quickly resolve the issue without fully understanding its origin could lead to superficial fixes that don't address the underlying problem, potentially reintroducing the vulnerability or creating new ones. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation that leverages vRealize automation's audit and logging capabilities to trace the provisioning event. This aligns with best professional practices for incident response and security auditing. By examining the audit logs, the administrator can pinpoint the specific blueprint, workflow, or custom script responsible for deploying the vulnerable configuration. This detailed analysis allows for the identification of the exact point of failure, whether it's an outdated template, an insecure custom code snippet, or an improperly configured policy within vRealize automation. Remediation then focuses on correcting the source of the issue within the vRealize automation construct itself, ensuring that future deployments are compliant. This proactive approach not only resolves the immediate incident, but also strengthens the overall security posture of the automated environment by addressing the root cause. This adheres to principles of least privilege and secure by design, which are fundamental to robust cloud security. Incorrect approach is analysis. Manually remediating the vulnerability on the affected virtual machines without identifying the source in vRealize automation is an incorrect approach. This is a reactive measure that does not address the systemic issue. It fails to prevent future occurrences of the same vulnerability being deployed through the automation pipeline, leading to recurring incidents and increased operational overhead. Ethically and professionally, this approach neglects the responsibility to ensure the integrity and security of the automated provisioning process. Disabling the specific blueprint entirely without further investigation is also an incorrect approach. While it stops further deployments of the vulnerable configuration, it does not identify why the blueprint became vulnerable. This could be due to an outdated software component within the blueprint, a change in external dependencies, or an error in the blueprint's configuration. Without understanding the root cause, the blueprint cannot be safely re-enabled or improved, leading to a loss of valuable automation functionality and potentially hindering legitimate business operations. This approach is a blunt instrument that bypasses the necessary diagnostic steps, focusing solely on patching the operating system on the deployed virtual machines without investigating the vRealize automation configuration is an incorrect approach. While patching is a critical security measure, in this context, it treats the symptom rather than the disease. The vulnerability was introduced through the automated provisioning process managed by vRealize automation. If the blueprint or workflow remains uncorrected, the patched virtual machines will be redeployed with the same vulnerability, requiring continuous, inefficient manual intervention. This demonstrates a failure to understand and manage the automation lifecycle and its security implications. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this domain must adopt a structured incident response methodology. This involves 1. Identification, recognizing the incident and its potential impact. 2. Containment, limiting the spread or further impact of the incident. 3. Eradication, removing the root cause of the incident. 4. Recovery, restoring affected systems to normal operation. 5. Lessons learned, analyzing the incident to prevent recurrence. In this scenario, the correct approach directly addresses steps 3, 4, and 5 by investigating the source within vRealize automation, enabling proper remediation, and preventing future issues. The incorrect approaches focus only on containment or superficial recovery without addressing eradication and lessons learned, leading to a cycle of recurring vulnerabilities. Question 12. What factors determine the most effective and compliant method for enforcing regulatory policies on cloud resources provisioned through VMware vRealize Automation 8? 3. Considering the need for automated governance and auditability. Option A. The extent to which vRealize Automation's native policy and governance features are configured and utilized to enforce predefined compliance rules during the request and deployment lifecycle. Option B. The reliance on post-deployment scripting and manual audits to identify and remediate non-compliant resources after they have been provisioned. Option C. The implementation of custom, ad hoc automation scripts that operate independently of vRealize Automation's integrated policy management capabilities. Option D. The assumption that vRealize Automation's default settings automatically satisfy all relevant regulatory compliance mandates without explicit configuration. Correct answer is A. The extent to which vRealize Automation's native policy and governance features are configured and utilized to enforce predefined compliance rules during the request and deployment lifecycle. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, ensuring that deployed resources adhere to organizational policies and regulatory requirements, particularly when dealing with sensitive data or critical infrastructure. The professional challenge lies in balancing the speed and agility offered by vRealize Automation with the imperative of maintaining compliance and security. This requires a deep understanding of both the technical capabilities of vRealize Automation and the relevant regulatory landscape. Careful judgment is needed to select the most effective and compliant methods for enforcing these controls. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it leverages the built-in policy enforcement mechanisms within vRealize Automation, such as Cloud Assembly's policy constraints and governance policies. These features are designed to integrate compliance checks directly into the service catalog and deployment lifecycle. By defining and applying policies that align with regulatory frameworks, e.g., data residency, access control, encryption standards, organizations can automate compliance, reduce manual errors, and provide auditable evidence of adherence. This proactive approach is crucial for meeting regulatory obligations and mitigating risks. An incorrect approach that relies solely on post-deployment scripting or manual audits fails to integrate compliance into the provisioning process. This leads to a reactive stance where non-compliant resources might be deployed before being identified and remediated, increasing the risk of breaches or regulatory violations. Such an approach is inefficient, prone to human error, and makes demonstrating continuous compliance difficult. Another incorrect approach that bypasses vRealize Automation's policy engine in favor of custom, ad hoc solutions introduces complexity and reduces the manageability and auditability of the environment. While custom solutions might seem flexible, they often lack the integrated reporting and lifecycle management capabilities of native vRealize Automation features, making it harder to prove compliance to auditors. A further incorrect approach that assumes vRealize Automation inherently enforces all regulatory requirements without explicit configuration is a critical oversight. vRealize Automation is a powerful tool, but its effectiveness in regulatory compliance is directly proportional to how well its policy and governance features are configured and aligned with specific regulatory mandates. Without this deliberate configuration, the platform cannot guarantee compliance. The professional reasoning process should involve 1. Identifying applicable regulatory requirements and organizational policies. 2. Mapping these requirements to vRealize Automation's capabilities, particularly Cloud Assembly's policy and governance features. 3. Designing and implementing policies that enforce these requirements at the point of request and deployment. 4. Establishing a continuous monitoring and auditing process to verify ongoing compliance. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating policies to reflect changes in regulations or business needs. Question 13. When evaluating the security posture of a vRealize Automation 8.3 deployment, a cloud administrator has identified that users are frequently provisioning virtual machines with insecure configurations, such as default firewall rules and unencrypted storage. The administrator needs to implement a solution to ensure that all provisioned resources adhere to organizational security standards without significantly impeding the self-service capabilities of the platform. Which of the following approaches best addresses this challenge? Option A. Grant all users with the project member role full administrative privileges within their respective projects to expedite the provisioning process and reduce the need for granular controls. Option B. Disable all built-in security checks within vRealize Automation and rely exclusively on an external security information and event management seamless solution to scan for vulnerabilities post-provisioning. Option C. Conduct manual security audits of all provisioned virtual machines on a weekly basis to identify and remediate any configuration drift or policy violations. Option D. Implement custom properties and property groups within vRealize automation blueprints to define and enforce secure configuration parameters, and utilize role-based access control to limit user permissions to only those necessary for their roles. Correct answer is D. Implement custom properties and property groups within vRealize automation blueprints to define and enforce secure configuration parameters, and utilize role-based access control to limit user permissions to only those necessary for their roles. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments where resource provisioning needs to align with organizational policies and security best practices. The core difficulty lies in balancing the speed and agility offered by vRealize automation with the imperative to maintain a secure and compliant infrastructure. Misconfigurations or unauthorized access can lead to significant security vulnerabilities, data breaches, and non-compliance with internal governance or external regulations. Though for this exam, we focus solely on the technical and operational framework of vRealize Automation 8.3, as per its documentation and best practices, not external legal jurisdictions. The professional challenge is to implement controls that are effective without unduly hindering legitimate user access and operational efficiency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging vRealize automation's built-in capabilities for policy enforcement and access control. Specifically, using custom properties and property groups to define and enforce resource configurations, and role-based access control (RBAC) to limit user permissions to only what is necessary for their roles, directly addresses the security and operational requirements. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and ensures that deployments adhere to predefined standards. By integrating these controls within the automation platform, administrators can ensure consistency and compliance across all provisioned resources, reducing the risk of manual errors and unauthorized modifications. This proactive approach is best professional practice as it embeds security and governance into the automation workflow itself. Incorrect approaches analysis. Manually auditing every deployment after provisioning is an inefficient and reactive approach. It fails to prevent misconfigurations from occurring in the first place, leading to potential security gaps that could be exploited before detection. This approach is professionally unacceptable because it relies on human intervention for critical security checks, which is prone to error and delays, and does not scale with the automation platform's capabilities. Disabling all security checks and relying solely on external security tools to scan for vulnerabilities after deployment is also professionally unsound. While external scanning is a valuable part of a security strategy, it should complement, not replace, built-in controls within the automation platform. This approach creates a window of vulnerability between provisioning and scanning, and it bypasses the opportunity to enforce security policies at the point of creation, which is the most effective time to do so. It also fails to leverage the integrated security features of vRealize automation, granting broad administrative privileges to all users to simplify the provisioning process is a severe security and operational failure. This violates the principle of least privilege, exposes the environment to a high risk of accidental or malicious misconfiguration, and makes it impossible to track accountability for specific actions. Such an approach is fundamentally contrary to secure cloud automation practices and would lead to an unmanageable and insecure environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this scenario by first understanding the security and compliance requirements. Then, they should identify the capabilities within vRealize Automation 8.3 that can enforce these requirements. This involves a thorough understanding of RBAC, custom properties, property groups, and blueprint design. The decision-making process should prioritize proactive controls integrated into the automation workflow over reactive measures. When faced with a choice, always select the method that embeds security and governance at the point of resource creation and adheres to the principle of least privilege. Question 14. Compliance review shows that a vRealize Automation 8.3 blueprint for deploying virtual machines in a regulated industry has inadvertently allowed deployments to bypass critical data residency controls and access logging requirements. The blueprint was designed to offer flexibility, but failed to incorporate mandatory policy enforcement for these specific compliance mandates. What is the most professional and compliant approach to address this situation? Option A. Immediately disable the affected compliance policies within vRealize automation to prevent further deployment failures while a permanent fix is developed. Option B. Manually reconfigure each deployed virtual machine to meet the data residency and access logging requirements without modifying the vRealize blueprint. Option C. Revert all currently deployed virtual machines to a previous known good state and then proceed with developing and testing a corrected blueprint. Option D. Isolate the affected environment. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the blueprint misconfiguration. Develop and test a corrected blueprint with enforced policies, and then implement a phased rollout with validation. The correct answer is A. Immediately disable the affected compliance policies within vRealize automation to prevent further deployment failures while a permanent fix is developed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments where the rapid deployment of resources can outpace the establishment of robust security and compliance controls. The professional is tasked with remediating a situation or a critical compliance requirement, specifically related to data residency and access logging, has been inadvertently bypassed due to a misconfiguration in the vRealize automation (vRealize) blueprint. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for operational continuity with the imperative to rectify the compliance gap without introducing further risks or disruptions. The pressure to quickly resolve the issue, coupled with the potential for significant business impact if the non-compliance is exploited or discovered by auditors, necessitates a thorough and risk-aware approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes immediate containment, thorough investigation, and a controlled remediation. First, isolating the affected resources or environments prevents further non-compliant deployments and limits the potential impact of the misconfiguration. This is crucial for maintaining a secure posture. Second, a detailed root cause analysis is essential to understand precisely how the blueprint allowed the bypass of the data residency and access logging controls. This analysis should involve reviewing blueprint logic, associated policies, and vRealize integration points with underlying cloud infrastructure. Third, developing and testing a corrected blueprint that explicitly enforces the required data residency and access logging policies is paramount. This ensures that future deployments will adhere to compliance standards. Finally, a phased rollout of the corrected blueprint, coupled with comprehensive validation and monitoring, minimizes the risk of introducing new issues and confirms the effectiveness of the remediation. This approach aligns with best practices for incident response and change management in regulated environments, ensuring that compliance is not just addressed but also demonstrably maintained. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately reverting all deployed resources to a previous known good state without understanding the scope or impact of the misconfiguration. This is a blunt instrument that can cause significant operational disruption and data loss, potentially violating business continuity requirements and demonstrating a lack of nuanced problem solving. It fails to address the root cause and may lead to repeated issues if the underlying blueprint flaw isn't fixed. Another incorrect approach is to simply disable the compliance checks within vRealize to allow current operations to continue while a fix is developed. This is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. It knowingly allows non-compliant operations to persist, increasing the risk of data breaches, regulatory penalties, and reputational damage. It prioritizes short-term convenience over long-term security and compliance obligations. A third incorrect approach is to manually reconfigure each deployed resource to meet compliance requirements without updating the vRealize blueprint. While this might address the immediate compliance gap for existing deployments, it fails to prevent future non-compliant deployments. This approach is inefficient, prone to human error, and does not resolve the systemic issue within the automation platform, thus representing a failure in establishing sustainable compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a challenge should adopt a structured incident response and remediation framework. This begins with immediate containment to prevent further damage. Following containment, a thorough root cause analysis is critical to understand the why behind the issue. Based on this understanding, a remediation plan should be developed that addresses both the immediate problem and the underlying systemic flaw. This plan should be risk-assessed, with clear rollback procedures and validation steps. Communication with stakeholders, including compliance and security teams, is vital throughout the process. The decision-making process should always prioritize the integrity of compliance controls and the security of data, even when faced with operational pressures. Question 15. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess the effectiveness of a VMware vRealize Automation 8.3 deployment. Which of the following evaluation approaches best aligns with professional best practices for assessing the overall health and strategic alignment of the vRealize environment? Option A. Verifying the successful completion of a predefined set of automated workflows and confirming the vRealize appliance is accessible from the network. Option B. Reviewing the number of active blueprints and their associated provisioning times while ensuring the vRealize appliance reports high availability. Option C. Analyzing the resource utilization metrics of the vRealize appliance and comparing them against vendor-recommended thresholds. Option D. Assessing the adherence of catalog item deployments to defined security policies, the reusability of blueprint components, and the efficiency of approval workflows. The correct answer is B. Reviewing the number of active blueprints and their associated provisioning times, while ensuring the vRealize appliance reports high availability. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical need to assess the effectiveness and adherence to established best practices within a VMware vRealize Automation (vRA) 8.3 deployment. The challenge lies in moving beyond mere functional verification to a comprehensive review of how the vRealize environment supports business objectives, security postures, and operational efficiency. This requires a nuanced understanding of the platform's capabilities and the potential pitfalls of suboptimal configurations or unaligned processes. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically examines the vRealize deployment against a predefined set of criteria that encompass technical efficacy, security compliance, and alignment with organizational governance. This holistic evaluation ensures that the vRealize implementation is not only operational, but also optimized for its intended purpose, minimizing risks and maximizing value. Adherence to such a methodology demonstrates a commitment to robust IT governance and operational excellence, which are implicitly expected in professional IT environments. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the number of deployed blueprints without considering their complexity, reusability, or adherence to security standards fails to address the qualitative aspects of the vRealize deployment. This oversight can lead to a proliferation of unmanaged or insecure catalog items, increasing the attack surface and operational overhead. It also neglects the strategic value of vRealize in enabling self-service and automation, focusing instead on superficial metrics. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the speed of provisioning over the thoroughness of the approval workflows and compliance checks is professionally unacceptable. This can result in unauthorized resource deployments, security policy violations, and a lack of auditability, directly contravening principles of responsible IT resource management and potentially violating internal policies or external regulatory requirements for resource allocation and security. A third incorrect approach that solely evaluates the uptime of the vRealize appliance without assessing the performance and availability of the services it orchestrates is also flawed. While appliance uptime is important, it does not guarantee that the automated workflows are functioning correctly or that the end-user experience is satisfactory. This narrow focus misses critical aspects of service delivery and user satisfaction, which are key performance indicators for any automation platform. Professional reasoning process should involve defining clear evaluation objectives aligned with business goals, establishing measurable criteria for success, and employing a structured methodology that considers technical, security, and operational dimensions. Professionals must critically assess each aspect of the vRealize deployment, looking for evidence of best practice implementation, risk mitigation, and alignment with organizational policies and industry standards. This systematic and comprehensive evaluation ensures that the vRealize environment is a strategic asset rather than a source of technical debt or security vulnerabilities. Question 16. The audit findings indicate that the current risk assessment process for the vRealize Automation 8.3 environment is not adequately identifying and prioritizing potential threats to sensitive data and service availability. Which of the following approaches best addresses this deficiency? Option A. implementing a comprehensive risk assessment framework that includes threat modeling, vulnerability analysis, and impact assessment, with regular reviews and updates. Option B, delegating the risk assessment responsibility to junior IT staff with limited experience in cloud security and risk management. Option C, focusing exclusively on technical vulnerability scanning without considering the business context or potential impact of exploitation. Option D, relying on the absence of recent security incidents as an indicator that the current risk posture is acceptable. The correct answer is A, implementing a comprehensive risk assessment framework that includes threat modeling, vulnerability analysis, and impact assessment, with regular reviews and updates. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential gap in the organization's risk assessment process for its vRealize automation, VRA 8.3 environment. This scenario is professionally challenging because a robust risk assessment is foundational to ensuring the security, compliance, and operational integrity of a cloud management platform like VRA. The challenge lies in accurately identifying, analyzing, and prioritizing risks that could impact the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the services managed by vRA, as well as the underlying infrastructure. A failure to do so can lead to significant security breaches, compliance violations, and service disruptions. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive risk assessment methodology that aligns with established cybersecurity frameworks and organizational policies. This approach ensures that all relevant threats and vulnerabilities are considered, their potential impact is evaluated, and appropriate mitigation strategies are developed. This represents best professional practice because it proactively addresses potential issues before they can be exploited, thereby safeguarding organizational assets and maintaining trust. It directly supports the principles of due diligence and responsible IT governance, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory bodies overseeing data protection and IT security. An incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or superficial checks. For instance, assuming that because no incidents have occurred, the risk is negligible, is a failure of due diligence. This ignores the potential for undiscovered vulnerabilities or future threats. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on technical vulnerabilities without considering the business impact or the likelihood of exploitation. This leads to misprioritization of risks and inefficient allocation of resources. A further incorrect approach is to delegate the risk assessment to individuals without sufficient expertise in vRA or risk management principles, leading to incomplete or inaccurate assessments. These failures can result in regulatory noncompliance, as many frameworks mandate a structured and documented risk assessment process. Ethically, it represents a failure to adequately protect the organization's information assets and the data of its users. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the scope and objectives of the risk assessment. This involves identifying critical assets managed by vRA, potential threat actors, and relevant vulnerabilities. Next, they should apply a consistent methodology for analyzing the likelihood and impact of identified risks. This analysis should inform the prioritization of risks, guiding the selection of appropriate mitigation controls. Finally, the process should include regular review and updates to the risk assessment to account for changes in the threat landscape, the vRA environment, and business objectives. Question 17. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly adopting cloud automation to accelerate application delivery. In a VMware vRealize Automation 8.3 environment, the legal and compliance team has expressed significant concerns regarding potential unauthorized access to sensitive data and the need for strict audit trails. Conversely, the development team is pushing for greater self-service capabilities to enable rapid provisioning and management of their application environments. Considering the need to balance security, compliance, and operational efficiency, what is the most appropriate strategy for implementing access controls and automation workflows within vRealize Automation 8.3? Option A. Prioritize the development team's request for unrestricted self-service by disabling most security controls to facilitate rapid provisioning, with a plan to address compliance later. Option B. Implement granular role-based access controls (RBAC) within vRealize Automation, defining specific permissions for different user roles based on the principle of least privilege, and ensuring audit logs capture all relevant actions. Option C. Enforce a highly restrictive security policy that prevents all users, including developers, from performing any sensitive operations, thereby ensuring maximum security but limiting self-service functionality. Option D. Delegate all security and compliance responsibilities to the individual development teams, assuming they will implement appropriate controls within their own workflows. The correct answer is B. Implement granular role-based access controls, RBAC, within vRealize automation, defining specific permissions for different user roles based on the principle of least privilege, and ensuring audit logs capture all relevant actions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation projects where different business units have varying interpretations of security and compliance requirements. The challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid deployment and self-service with the imperative to maintain a secure and compliant infrastructure, especially when dealing with sensitive data. The differing perspectives of the legal and compliance team versus the development team create a potential conflict that, if not managed effectively, could lead to security vulnerabilities, regulatory noncompliance, or project delays. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the automation solution meets both operational efficiency goals and stringent security and compliance mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a collaborative effort to define and implement granular role-based access controls, RBAC, within VMware vRealize automation. This aligns with the principle of least privilege, a fundamental security best practice and often a regulatory requirement, e.g., SOX, HIPAA, GDPR, depending on the jurisdiction and data handled. By assigning specific permissions to different user roles, e.g., developers, operations, auditors, access to sensitive resources and operations can be strictly controlled. This ensures that only authorized personnel can perform specific actions, thereby mitigating risks of unauthorized access, data breaches, and accidental misconfigurations. This approach directly addresses the concerns of the legal and compliance team, while enabling the development team to provision resources within defined boundaries, fostering a secure and compliant self-service environment. This adheres to the principle of security by design and compliance by design. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to implement a blanket security policy that restricts all users from performing any sensitive operations, effectively disabling the self-service capabilities and frustrating the development team. This fails to acknowledge the legitimate need for developers to manage their deployed resources within a controlled framework and can lead to workarounds that bypass security controls, creating shadow IT and increasing risk. It also fails to meet the business objective of enabling efficient resource provisioning. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of deployment and self-service functionality without adequately consulting or incorporating the requirements of the legal and compliance team. This could result in the creation of automation workflows that inadvertently expose sensitive data, violate data residency regulations, or lack necessary audit trails. This directly contravenes regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities to protect data and maintain compliance. A third incorrect approach would be to implement overly complex and difficult-to-manage security configurations that are not well documented or understood by the operational teams. This can lead to misconfigurations, unintended access, and a general breakdown of security posture over time, negating the intended benefits of RBAC and potentially creating compliance gaps. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, engaging all relevant stakeholders early and continuously. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the data and services being automated. Thorough assessment of potential threats and vulnerabilities should be conducted. The principle of least privilege should guide the design of RBAC policies, ensuring that users have only the necessary permissions to perform their job functions. Regular audits and reviews of access controls and automation workflows are crucial to maintain security and compliance. Documentation of all security configurations and policies is essential for transparency and accountability. Question 18. The risk matrix shows a moderate risk associated with the current vRealize automation blueprint for provisioning virtual machines for the customer-facing analytics platform, specifically concerning the lack of automated security hardening during initial deployment. The security team has flagged this as a potential vulnerability that could be exploited. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this finding? Option A. Document the risk as low priority and monitor the deployed instances for any signs of compromise. Option B. Immediately modify the blueprint to include the security hardening steps to expedite the remediation of the identified risk. Option C. Implement manual security hardening procedures on each virtual machine after it has been provisioned by vRealize automation. Option D. Initiate a formal change request to update the vRealize automation blueprint to include automated security hardening steps, ensuring it is reviewed and approved by the security and change advisory boards. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal change request to update the vRealize automation blueprint to include automated security hardening steps, ensuring it is reviewed and approved by the security and change advisory boards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation where security and operational efficiency must be balanced. The risk matrix highlights a potential vulnerability in the automated provisioning process for a critical application. The challenge lies in determining the most effective and compliant method to address this risk without unduly hindering the business's ability to deploy necessary resources. The pressure to deliver services quickly can sometimes lead to overlooking or downplaying security implications, making a structured and compliant approach essential. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the identified risk against established security policies and compliance requirements. This means engaging with the security team to understand the specific threat vector and its potential impact. Subsequently, a change request process, adhering to the organization's IT governance framework, should be initiated. This process ensures that any modification to the vRealize automation blueprint is documented, assessed for its impact on security and compliance, and approved by relevant stakeholders before implementation. This aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation, ensuring that security controls are not bypassed and that the organization remains compliant with its internal policies and any applicable external regulations. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately implement the proposed change to the blueprint without further review. This bypasses established change control procedures and risk assessment protocols. It represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure because it prioritizes speed over security and compliance, potentially exposing the organization to unmitigated risks. This could lead to breaches of data privacy regulations or internal security standards, resulting in reputational damage and financial penalties. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the risk as low without consulting the security team or referencing the established risk matrix. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adhere to the organization's risk management framework. It is professionally irresponsible to make unilateral decisions about security risks, especially when a formal process for risk assessment and mitigation exists. This approach could lead to the deployment of insecure infrastructure, violating compliance mandates, and potentially leading to security incidents. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to manually remediate the vulnerability on each deployed instance after provisioning. While this might seem like a quick fix, it is inefficient, prone to human error, and does not address the root cause within the automation blueprint. This is a failure of proactive risk management and can lead to inconsistent security postures across the environment. It also undermines the principle of security by design that automation should embody and could be seen as a violation of operational efficiency and security standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to established governance, risk, and compliance (GRC) frameworks. When a risk is identified, the first step is always to understand its context within the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. This involves consulting relevant documentation, engaging with subject matter experts, like the security team, and following documented procedures for risk assessment and change management. The goal is to implement solutions that are both effective in mitigating risk and compliant with all applicable standards, ensuring the integrity and security of the automated environment. Question 19. Operational review demonstrates that automated provisioning of virtual machines for financial data analysis is occurring rapidly, but there is a lack of clear policy enforcement regarding data classification and access controls within the vRealize automation blueprints. Which approach best ensures regulatory compliance with U.S. financial sector regulations? Option A. Conduct periodic. Manual audits of deployed resources to identify and remediate any compliance deviations after provisioning is complete. Option B. Rely on end users to manually apply data classification and access control measures to the resources they provision through vRealize automation. Option C. Integrate data classification and access control policies directly into vRealize automation blueprints and workflows, ensuring automated enforcement during resource provisioning. Option D. Prioritize the speed of resource deployment to meet business demands, with compliance checks performed as a secondary, less urgent task. The correct answer is C. Integrate data classification and access control policies directly into vRealize automation blueprints and workflows, ensuring automated enforcement during resource provisioning. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments, where the rapid deployment of resources can outpace the establishment of robust compliance controls. The professional challenge lies in balancing the agility offered by vRealize automation with the imperative to adhere to established regulatory frameworks, specifically those governing data handling and access within the U.S. financial sector. The core of the problem is ensuring that automated provisioning processes do not inadvertently create compliance gaps. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it proactively integrates compliance requirements into the automation lifecycle. By embedding data classification and access control policies directly into the vRealize automation blueprints and workflows, the organization ensures that compliance is a foundational element of resource deployment, not an afterthought. This aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design, which are critical for meeting regulatory obligations such as those mandated by the SEC and FINRA for financial institutions. This approach minimizes the risk of unauthorized data access or improper handling of sensitive information, thereby preventing potential regulatory violations and associated penalties. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on post-deployment audits is professionally unacceptable. This method creates a significant compliance gap because it allows non-compliant resources to exist in the production environment for a period, increasing the risk of data breaches or regulatory scrutiny. The regulatory failure here is the lack of proactive control, which is a direct contravention of the principle of continuous compliance expected in regulated industries. Relying on manual remediation after the fact is inefficient, error-prone, and does not demonstrate due diligence in protecting sensitive financial data. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over policy enforcement is equally problematic. While agility is a benefit of automation, it cannot come at the expense of regulatory adherence. This approach creates a direct conflict with the requirement to maintain a compliant infrastructure, potentially leading to violations of data privacy and security regulations. The ethical failure is the prioritization of operational convenience over the safeguarding of customer data and the integrity of financial operations. A third incorrect approach that delegates compliance responsibility solely to the end users without providing them with clear, automated controls is also a failure. While user awareness is important, expecting users to consistently interpret and apply complex regulatory requirements to automated deployments is unrealistic and prone to error. This approach abdicates the organization's responsibility to implement effective controls and creates a significant risk of non-compliance, as users may lack the necessary expertise or tools to ensure adherence. The regulatory failure is the absence of a robust control framework that ensures consistent application of compliance policies across all automated deployments. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves a risk-based approach. First, identify the critical regulatory requirements applicable to the data and services being automated. Second, assess how vRealize automation's capabilities can be leveraged to enforce these requirements. Third, design automation workflows and blueprints that embed these controls from the outset. Fourth, implement continuous monitoring and auditing mechanisms to verify ongoing compliance. Finally, establish clear escalation paths and remediation procedures for any identified deviations. This structured approach ensures that automation enhances, rather than compromises, the organization's compliance posture. Question 20. The efficiency study reveals that the process for introducing new self-service infrastructure offering through VMware vRealize Automation 8.3 lacks a formalized and consistent risk assessment phase before deployment, Which of the following approaches best addresses this deficiency while adhering to professional best practices for secure and compliant automation? Option A. Instruct end users to conduct their own risk assessments for any services they request through vRealize automation, documenting their findings in the request form. Option B. Implement a mandatory risk assessment workflow within vRealize automation that is triggered for every new service blueprint and custom resource, requiring review and approval by a designated security team before the service can be published to the catalog. Option C. Rely solely on post-deployment vulnerability scanning tools to identify and remediate any security issues that arise after new services are made available to users. Option D. Expedite the publication of new services to the catalog to improve user satisfaction, with the understanding that any identified risks will be addressed reactively as they are discovered. The correct answer is B. Implement a mandatory risk assessment workflow within vRealize automation that is triggered for every new service blueprint and custom resource, requiring review and approval by a designated security team before the service can be published to the catalog. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential gap in the risk assessment process for deploying new services within VMware vRealize automation, VRA. 8.3. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the speed of service delivery with robust security and compliance measures. A failure to adequately assess risks can lead to vulnerabilities, data breaches, or non-compliance with organizational policies and potentially industry-specific regulations. Though this exam focuses on the technical framework, the underlying principles of risk management are universally applicable to secure operations. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated risk assessment that is embedded within the vRealize service catalog and workflow design. This ensures that potential risks are identified and mitigated before a service is made available to end users. This aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing security and compliance by design, reducing the likelihood of costly remediation efforts and reputational damage. It also supports the principle of least privilege and ensures that deployed services adhere to established security baselines. An incorrect approach that bypasses or inadequately performs risk assessment for new services is professionally unacceptable. This could manifest as a failure to identify vulnerabilities in the underlying infrastructure or application components being provisioned, or neglecting to consider the security implications of the automation workflows themselves. Such oversights represent a direct contravention of responsible IT governance and could lead to regulatory non-compliance if specific data handling or security standards are not met. It also demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting organizational assets and user data. Another incorrect approach might be to rely solely on post-deployment security scans. While valuable, this reactive strategy fails to prevent risks from being introduced in the first place. It is akin to closing the barn door after the horses have bolted, and can result in significant disruption and potential data exposure during the period between deployment and discovery of the vulnerability. This approach is less effective and more costly than a preventative one. Finally, an approach that delegates risk assessment entirely to the end users requesting the service is also flawed. End users typically lack the technical expertise and security awareness to identify all potential risks associated with infrastructure provisioning. This places an undue burden on them and increases the likelihood of security gaps being overlooked. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This includes identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, analyzing their likelihood and impact, evaluating existing controls, and determining appropriate mitigation strategies. In the context of vRealize, this means integrating these steps into the service blueprint and workflow development lifecycle, ensuring that security and compliance are considered at every stage.